The story you were told about the Tower of Babel is a lie. It's not a tale of divine punishment for human ambition. It's the oldest and most precise map ever drawn of your own mind hitting a wall. This is the moment your ego, the part of you that builds, strives, and seeks a name, reaches the absolute limit of what it can understand. And what happens next isn't punishment, it's liberation. Think about your own life, the project that consumed you, the identity you built, the reputation you crafted. It felt like reaching for heaven, didn't it? And then confusion, a sudden inability to understand the people around you, a fragmentation of your own purpose. You thought you failed. You thought you were being punished for reaching too high. What if you were being saved from a prison you couldn't see? This video is not an interpretation, it's a decoding. We are going to walk back through the original Hebrew text, not to read a story, but to witness a psychological event. We will see how the builders of Babel are not ancient people. They are a specific structure inside your consciousness. And their scattering is not a curse. It is the necessary, merciful, and intelligent fracturing of a singular, egoic identity that has grown too rigid to contain the totality of who you are. This is where it changes everything. For thousands of years, this story has been taught as a simple morality play. Humans got proud, God got angry, God confused their languages to put them in their place. It's a story of hubris and punishment. It's clean, it's simple, and it is catastrophically incomplete. That version serves a very specific purpose. It keeps the story in the realm of external authority. It makes God a celestial police officer and humanity a bunch of naughty children. It's a story that benefits any system that wants you to fear your own ambition, to distrust your own reach, to see your moments of greatest confusion as evidence of your own sinfulness. But the text itself does not say that. Not in its original language, not in its structure. The core problem is that we read Genesis as history, when it is anatomy. We look for events in the world when we should be looking for events in the psyche. The promise here is permanent. Once you see the Tower of Babel for what it truly maps, the egoic mind's attempt to construct a monolithic, self-referential reality, you will never again experience your own periods of fragmentation, confusion, or lost direction as failure. You will recognize them as the beginning of a deeper, more authentic integration. Remember what I just said. This is exactly what I meant. Let's start with the obvious answer, the one you know. The surface reading, Genesis 11:1-9. The whole earth had one language. People migrated east, found a plain in Shinar, and decided to build a city with a tower whose top would reach into the heavens. Their stated goal: let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. God comes down, sees the city and the tower, and says, behold, they are one people, and they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. So God confuses their language, scatters them, and they stop building. The city is called Babel, because there God confused the language of all the earth. The moral? Don't try to be like God. Don't get too big for your britches. Stay in your lane. Humility is the virtue. Ambition is the sin. This is the interpretation that has been handed down for millennia. It feels right. It feels biblical. But it only feels that way because it resonates with a deep, unconscious fear inside the ego itself, the fear of its own dissolution. The ego's primary mission is to make a name for itself, to create a stable, continuous, recognizable identity. Of course, it would interpret any threat to that project as a punishment. Now stop for a second. We have to question the central character in this drama, God. Or more precisely, the Hebrew word used here, Y-H-U-Y. We are not reading about a distant anthropomorphic deity who feels threatened. We are in the book of Genesis, the map of consciousness coming into being. Yipapwachwaidwe represents the ground of being itself, the unified field from which all phenomena arise. It is not a person, it is the principle of reality. So when God comes down to see the city and the tower, we are not watching a theistic intervention. We are watching consciousness itself, observing a pattern within itself, a pattern that has become pathological. The builders say, let us make a name for ourselves. The Hebrew word for name is Shem. But Shem is not just a label. In Hebrew thought, a name contains the essence, the nature, the reality of a thing. To make a Shem is to attempt to define your own essence, to construct your own reality from your own will and intellect. It is the ego's ultimate project, self-creation. To build a tower whose top is in the heavens, Shra HaShamayim. The heavens are not a physical place up there. They symbolize the realm of the spiritual, the unified, the divine. The ego is attempting to build a structure so high, so impressive, that it can mechanically access the unified state. It wants to reach heaven not through surrender, but through engineering and their fear, lest we be dispersed. The Hebrew putz means to be scattered, fragmented, spread thin. The ego's greatest terror is not punishment, but diaspora, the loss of its centralized control, the diffusion of its singular focus. So it builds a city, a fixed, rigid structure of identity, and a tower, a single piercing vector of ambition to prevent that scattering. The entire project is a monument to the fear of falling apart. Now, God's response. This is the part nobody sees. God says, "Behold, they are one people, Am Eshad, and they have all one language, Safa Achath. And this is only the beginning of what they will do, and nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them." Read that not as a threat, but as a diagnosis. It is a statement of fact from the perspective of consciousness itself. The ego has achieved perfect monolithic unity. Its language, its internal narrative, is completely coherent. Its people, its subpersonalities, drives, and desires are fully aligned under a single egoic command. This unity is not a virtue. It is a trap. Because from this place of perfect egoic unity, nothing will be impossible for them. That sounds like a good thing, right? But think about what that means. In a state of pure, unchecked ego, any fantasy, any distortion, any self-destructive or world-destructive idea can be pursued with total unified energy. There is no internal dissent, no competing voice, no perspective from outside the ego's own reality tunnel. This is the psychology of the fanatic, the tyrant, the addict, the workaholic, any state where the ego has fully consolidated power and silenced all other parts of the self. It is incredibly powerful, and it is utterly cut off from the whole. So what does consciousness do? Does it punish? The Hebrew verb is balal. It is translated as confuse, but its root meaning is to mix, to mingle, to pour together. It's the same root as the word for confusion. Balal becomes Babel. But see the action. God balal, their safa, lamo, their language. The unified egoic narrative is mixed. Different perspectives, different internal voices, different ways of processing reality are introduced. The monolithic story breaks apart into many stories, and then they are scattered, putes, over the face of the earth. The very thing the ego feared most is enacted. But here is the inversion. Is this a punishment, or is it a merciful intervention? From the ego's perspective, it is a catastrophe. Its great work is stopped. Its unity is shattered. Its name is not made. It is the ultimate failure. But from the perspective of the total psyche, from the viewpoint of Chostais, the ground of being, what has happened? A pathological closed system has been opened. The rigidity has been softened. The totalitarian regime of a single identity has been dissolved into a diversity of perspectives. The scattering is not a curse. It is the reintroduction of complexity, difference, and potential for relationship. The ego's prison walls have been torn down, and it experiences this not as freedom, but as exile. That is the problem. We have been viewing this story from the ego's perspective all along. We identified with the builders, with their ambition, with their tragic fall. We saw God as the angry parent shutting down the dream. But what if we are not meant to identify with the builders? What if we are meant to witness the builders as a temporary, necessary, but ultimately limiting structure within us? And what if the action of God is the innate intelligence of our own consciousness, working to prevent any one part from claiming the whole? This is where it gets dangerous, because this reframes everything you think you know about your own life. If what you're hearing has started to shift something, if the idea that your confusion might be a form of grace is landing, then stay. You're not just learning a new Bible fact, you're seeing the architecture of your own mind. And this is where that continues. We're about to go deeper into the lexical forensics to prove this isn't just a nice idea, but what the text was designed to reveal. Let's perform the autopsy on the key words. The place is Shinar. In the Hebrew imagination, Shinar is not a neutral location. It is repeatedly associated with systems of human power and control opposed to the divine order. It's the home of Nimrod, the archetypal mighty hunter, and later, Babylon. It represents the plane of human ambition, the flatland where the ego builds its empires. No mountains, no natural variation, just a blank slate for projection. They use brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Now, this is a technical detail most skip. But in the symbolic language of Genesis, stone is a natural material. It is given by the earth. Brick is manufactured. It is uniform, human-made, artificial. Bitumen is a sludgy black tar. It holds things together with a rigid, unnatural bond. The entire construction is an act of substitution, replacing the organic, given, diverse materials of reality with uniform, ego-manufactured components. The ego is building a reality out of its own ideas, cemented together by the sticky black glue of its own will. It is creating a simulacrum. The tower is amygdalos, a watchtower, a fortress. Its purpose is to see far, to survey the territory, to maintain control. The ego is building a central command post from which it can observe and dominate the entire landscape of its experience. It wants a vantage point in the heavens. It wants the perspective of the whole, but it wants to seize it, own it, and look down from it. And here is the forensic clue that changes the case. God says, "Come, let us go down and Balal their language." The word us is a conversation within the Godhead, a conversation within the unified field of consciousness itself. And the verb is Balal. This is not confuse. This is the part nobody sees. In every other use in the Hebrew Bible, Balal means to mix, to mingle, to pour together. It's the word used for mixing oil for anointing, for mingling peoples. Its core meaning is not to create chaos, but to create a mixture, to take separate, distinct things and blend them. Now stop for a second. Think about that. The ego project, the tower, is an act of enforced uniformity. One language, one purpose, one kind of brick, one goal. It is the mind trying to make everything the same, under its control. And the divine response is not to punish, but to introduce mixture, to Balal the language, to take that single monolithic egoic voice and diversify it, to shatter the monologue into a dialogue, into a chorus. That is not a punishment. That is a therapeutic intervention. The ego reaches its limit when its language becomes the only language, when its story is the only story, when its brick is the only building material. The limit is not a wall God puts up. The limit is the existential dead end of a mind talking only to itself. The confusion is the saving grace of otherness breaking in. It is the system being saved from its own totalitarian success. Now you see it. The story says they scattered them over the face of all the earth, from the flat plain of Shinar, the domain of singular ambition, to the entire face of the earth, with all its mountains, valleys, oceans, and deserts, from uniformity to diversity, from a single point of control to a scattered, networked existence. This is not exile. This is seeding. If this is making a profound, almost unsettling sense to you right now, if the idea that your deepest frustrations might be a form of liberation is ringing a bell you didn't even know was there, it's because you already knew. You've lived this. You've been the builder, and you felt the scattering. This isn't new information. This is recognition, and recognition is the first step of awakening. So let's bring in the second witness, the psychological map. Carl Jung didn't write about Babel, but he wrote extensively about the psyche's movement from the ego's kingdom of the conscious mind toward the wholeness of the self. The ego, in its immature state, seeks to be the sole ruler. It wants a single, coherent narrative. It represses what doesn't fit, judges what is other, and builds a tower of identity. I am this kind of person, with these beliefs, this story. That tower is impressive. It gives you a sense of stability, of knowing who you are. But Jung called the next necessary phase enantiodromia, the emergence of the opposite. When any conscious attitude becomes too one-sided, too rigid, the unconscious will inevitably produce its opposite to correct the course. The ego builds a tower of I know, and the unconscious, like a divine response, belaws the language. It sends dreams you can't understand. It produces emotions that contradict your story. It creates conflict, confusion in your relationships and your goals. It scatters your single-minded purpose. This is not your psyche breaking down. It is your psyche breaking open. The limit you hit is the limit of the ego's vocabulary. You literally run out of words because your story can no longer contain your experience. The anxiety, the feeling of being lost, the sense that the old map doesn't work. This is the Balal. This is the mixture being poured into your monolithic plan. Your psyche is forcing a dialogue between the part of you that built the tower and the parts of you it left out on the plain. And this is where it gets dangerous for our comfortable interpretations. Because we've been taught to pray for clarity, to seek a single divine answer, to want God to speak in one clear voice. But what if the voice of the whole, the voice of the divine us, is inherently a mingled voice, a chorus? What if your calling isn't to find the one right language, but to become fluent in the many languages of your own soul? Think about what that means. Neuroscience offers a stunning parallel. The brain's default mode network, DMN, often called the narrative self or the ego network, is the system that generates your ongoing story of you. It's the tower builder. It integrates memories, projects the future, and maintains a coherent sense of identity. But studies on mindfulness, trauma, and profound insight show that healing and growth often involve a deactivation or a quieting of this network. When the DMN's constant single-story monologue dims, other brain networks can communicate. Sensory awareness, interoception, feeling the body, empathy, these come online. The confusion of tongues is, in a very real sense, a neurological event. It's the weakening of the ego narrative's dominance so that the other languages of your being, the language of sensation, of intuition, of emotion, can be heard. The scattering is a distribution of cognitive resources. It's not a curse of fragmentation. It's a blessing of integration waiting to happen. We'll come back to this, because now we have to face the hardest, most personal question. If Babel is an internal event, then who is Nimrod? The Bible introduces him just before the Babel story. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. The phrase, before the Lord, lifnei wh, can also mean in opposition to the Lord. He is the archetypal force that builds empires of the self. He is the part of you that hunts down and kills any inner threat to your tower's coherence. He hunts your doubts, your weaknesses, your contradictions. He is the relentless inner critic, the achiever, the one who builds a name for himself. Nimrod is the ego in its imperial phase, and his project is Babel. Your ambition is not the problem. Your ambition to build a singular, impervious, self-glorifying monument is. This is the moment you realize the story has always been about you. The bricks, the mortar, the plane, the scattering, it's all a perfect mirror. If this mapping of your inner world is clicking into place, if you're seeing the tower you've been building and feeling the relief of its necessary scattering, then let me know. Drop "I'm awake" in the comments below. Tell me what city you're watching from, because this isn't just about understanding a story. It's about recognizing the story you're living. And that recognition creates a community of people who are no longer reading the map, but walking the terrain. So let's walk it. Let's move from forensic proof to lived experience. This is the personal mirror. Have you ever been absolutely certain of a path, a career, a relationship, a belief system? You had the plan, the bricks were uniform, the mortar of your will was strong. You were speaking one language to yourself. This is it. This is who I am. This is what success looks like. You were building your tower. And then, did something happen? Not necessarily a catastrophe, but a creeping sense of dissonance. A dream that didn't fit. A feedback from a friend that felt like a foreign tongue. A failure that didn't compute. A longing that contradicted your blueprint. Your single language began to falter. You couldn't explain your own feelings. Your clear purpose got muddy. You felt scattered. You likely interpreted that as a failure, as God punishing your ambition, as the universe conspiring against you. You thought you were being confused as a penalty, but what if you were being mixed as a mercy? That scattering was the Babel. It was the unconscious, the us, of your own wholeness, going down and introducing otherness into your monolithic plan. The frustration you felt was the friction of new vocabularies trying to emerge. The anxiety was the death rattle of a tower that had reached its limit, the limit of its ability to contain your soul's complexity. That is the Tower of Babel, inside you, right now. The part of you that wants one answer, one passion, one true calling, one simple story, that's the builder on the plane of Shinar. And the part of you that is rich, contradictory, multilingual, creative, and endlessly adaptive, that's the one being scattered to the four winds. Your depression might be a scattering, your midlife crisis might be a scattering, your creative block might be a scattering. It feels like a curse because it dismantles your tower, but it is the only thing that can save you from living your entire life in a monument to a smaller version of yourself. Now the story doesn't end with scattering, it just pauses there. Because the rest of the biblical narrative is the story of what happens after. It's the story of a people learning to carry a divine promise not from a tower, but in a tent, a mobile, adaptable structure. It's the story of a law given not in one monolithic slab, but through stories, poetry, prophecy, and paradox. It's the story of a Messiah who speaks in parables, not to give one clear answer, but to balal the understanding of his listeners, to force a deeper, more personal kind of knowing. The punishment narrative keeps you afraid of the scattering. It makes you cling harder to your tower, your single language. The true map shows you that the scattering is the beginning of your real journey. It is the ego reaching its limit, and the soul beginning its expedition. Pivot touch cliffhangers, too. So I'll ask you directly, what tower are you finishing, and what language is beginning to sound in you that you don't yet understand? Let's integrate this with a principle from the ancient world that perfectly captures this. The Greeks had a concept, peripeteia. It's the sudden reversal in a story, the moment when everything turns. In tragedy, it's the hero's fall, but in the map of the mind, peripeteia is the moment of scattering. It's the point where the direction you were so sure of reverses, not into failure, but into a deeper, more authentic trajectory. Your tower's peripeteia is not your ruin, it's your redirection. This is where we have to be brutally honest. The ego hates this. The Nimrod inside you will rage against the scattering. It will call it failure, confusion, divine displeasure. It will try to rebuild with bigger bricks and stronger bitumen. It will hunt down the new emerging voices and try to silence them. Your spiritual task is not to stop building. It is to learn the difference between building a tower and building a home. A tower is for looking down from. A home is for living in. A tower requires a single language. A home thrives on the laughter, arguments, and whispers of many. What we've uncovered here is just the surface, the foundational layer of this one story. But this pattern is the DNA of the entire biblical narrative. This is just the first crack in the code. Every major story, the garden, the flood, the Exodus, the prophets, operates on this exact same psychological architecture. A collective ego project, a divine interruption that feels like punishment, and a scattering that is actually the seeding of a higher complexity. The Tower of Babel is the master key, and once you turn it, every other locked door in this ancient text begins to swing open. What comes next changes everything. We're going to trace this pattern straight into the heart of your own life's narrative. And you will see the moments you thought were curses were, in fact, your own personal Babel events, your greatest redirections. Now, let's bring this home, to you, right now. Block 4, Personal Mirror and Emotional Landing, continued. Think of a goal you pursued with singular obsessive focus, a relationship you were determined to make work at all costs, a career path you climbed with blinders on, a version of yourself you constructed brick by painful brick, the successful one, the spiritual one, the enlightened one. You had one language for it: success, love, security, awakening. And then something happened. It fell apart. The relationship ended, the career stalled, the identity crumbled. The unified language you had for your life suddenly sounded like gibberish. You were scattered. What did you call that event? What name did your inner Nimrod give it? Failure, betrayal, wasted time, divine abandonment, punishment. But what if that scattering was the most intelligent thing that ever happened to you? What if the confusion of tongues was not the death of your dream, but the birth of your true vocabulary? The ego builds a tower to reach a singular, static heaven. The soul scatters to discover the infinite heavens within the earth. Your period of greatest confusion, where nothing made sense and all your old plans sounded like noise, was the construction site of your soul's new language. This is the part nobody sees. We spend our lives fearing the scattering. We see it as the enemy of progress. But the map says it is the progress. The neurological principle here is neuroplasticity under stress. When your coherent, monolithic worldview, your tower, is disrupted, your brain is forced out of its efficient, well-worn pathways. It has to form new connections. It has to listen to signals it previously ignored. The left hemisphere's tyrannical narrative is interrupted, and the right hemisphere's capacity for novel pattern recognition floods in. This is the neuroscience of revelation. Confusion is the solvent that dissolves the old structure so a more complex one can form. That is why the story says Yahweh came down to see the city and the tower. The divine doesn't reside in the finished product. It descends into the process of its undoing. God is in the scattering. So let's name it. That period of your life you've been calling your great failure or your time in the wilderness, that is your Babel, inside you, right now. The part of you that is still lamenting the loss of that unified, simple purpose is Nimrod, clinging to a brick. The part of you that emerged from the rubble, speaking a new, quieter, more authentic language, that is the scattered you. That is the you that was seated across the plains of your own potential. And this is where it gets dangerous. The dangerous thought is this: what if you are meant to be scattered? What if your wholeness does not come from building one impervious tower of self, but from allowing yourself to be distributed? To have a piece of your heart in art, a piece in service, a piece in solitude, a piece in community, all speaking different complementary languages. The ego screams that this is fragmentation. The soul knows it is integration at a higher order. The tower is a monument. A scattered people are a living ecosystem. Have you ever felt a strange relief when a grand plan fell apart? A hidden sense of freedom beneath the disappointment? That is your soul recognizing its Babel moment. That is the part of you that never wanted to live in that tower in the first place. Now, stop for a second. Feel the weight of that inversion. Your greatest setbacks are not divine punishments. They are divine linguistics. They are the universe forcing you to learn a new language because the old one was too small to contain what you are becoming. The confusion is not a sign you're lost. It's a sign you're being translated. And when we return to this idea in the context of collective human history, it will make sense in a way you're not expecting. The story was never about God fearing humanity. It was about humanity fearing its own boundless potential. The tower was a cage disguised as a ladder. Pivot du cliffhanger 3. So the most critical question you can ask yourself today is not, how do I rebuild? It's, what new language was born in me when my tower fell? Closing. Mental eco and session extension. Let's name the synthesis. We began with a paradox. The Tower of Babel wasn't God's punishment. We dismantled the Sunday school myth of a threatened deity. We went into the dirt of Shinar and met the Levanah, the manufactured self. We saw the Kemar, the sticky, binding narratives. We heard the Safah Yasha, the single, egoic story. And we witnessed the Balal, the benevolent, creative scattering that looked like chaos, but was, in fact, the genesis of true diversity. We discovered Nimrod within, the part that builds to conquer, to make a name, to avoid being scattered. And we discovered that Yahweh is the name for the intelligent process of life itself, that descends into our projects, not to destroy them, but to ensure they don't destroy us. The punishment was a projection. The scattering was a protection. The promise was that this story is a map of your psyche, and that map has been laid bare. You now have the coordinates for every tower you've ever built or will build. You know the feeling of the brick in your hand. You know the sound of the single story in your mind. And now, you know the sacred purpose of the scattering. This is the impact. This is the one line to take with you. You are not punished for your reach. You are perfected by your scatter. The next chapter cliffhanger is inevitable. If Babel is the story of the ego's limit and the soul's diaspora, then the very next story in Genesis is the exact opposite movement. It's the story of a man called to leave the collective, to be scattered on purpose, into a promise he